You mentioned desire, which brings me to my next question. There's this idea in Buddhism that desire is the root of all suffering, but actually
Yes.
from the original text, I think it should have been translated as craving, and craving
Yes.
as if attachment to, like, if I need to drink this bottle of water and if I don't do it, then I'm not enough. Then in that sense, maybe it will be a problem. So there's a kind of a misunderstanding from that angle, but there's a lot of a misunderstanding from the other angle too, because law of attraction has become a really buzzword, and there's so many things out there that refer to law of attraction that
Yeah.
and have nothing to do with, let's say, Abraham Hicks. And somebody's most common thing would be, oh, if I just think something hard enough, it's just going to happen. So could you speak a little bit about this relationship between desires and cravings? And I want to know what you think is the role of desire in personal development and personal transformation, or even insights about what we are speaking about. Does there have to be a desire for that?
There's no life without desire. And it's interesting that you're right in Buddhism, or that this mistranslation of desire, when the word is yearning, the
Mm,
word is like yearning. Yearning has notice, and if that's true, if that translation is mistranslated, then what? If you think about what Buddha said, well, he said, but how did he say it? So that desire, he's, I think the way it's described is that that's the cause of the suffering,
yeah.
right? But let's translate now. Yearning is the cause of the suffering. Desire is the feeling of life itself.
Mm,
Without desire, there is no life. Desire is felt only through your finite perspective, through the small you. And what you are feeling is all that you are. What you are feeling is the God that you are wanting to live through you. You feel as desire. What does that even mean? God wanting to live through you? God wanting to come alive through you into this physical existence. Wanting, God desiring, wanting expression of itself into form. The feeling you have from the finite perspective is the feeling of desire. Desire is not suffering. What is suffering is your resistance to it. That will cause suffering every time. There is nothing you can do about desire. You have no choice. This is where Sydney Banks said there is only one will, and that is the will of God. So God's will to come to life and to thrive and express through you will never be thwarted. That is the only will. It is eternal. It will never cease. You have free will. Your free will is to allow the expression and movement of the infinite through you, and you have the freedom to resist it. That is your free will. You have the freedom to allow, and you have the freedom to resist that. And so, in the resistance of it, see, because God will never assert anything, God will never force a thought into your head. You can allow the thoughts of God or you can resist. And but you cannot resist anything without feeling it. And you cannot allow anything without feeling it. So in the entire spectrum of whether you are allowing or resisting, you will feel it, which now gets to this, high and, positive and all of that. And Sydney Banks said, your wisdom is only in a positive feeling. Wisdom is only in a positive feeling. So when you are allowing that energy to flow through you, that is a positive feeling. When you are in resistance to it, that is a negative feeling. There's no intelligence, there is no wisdom in a negative feeling, because the negative feeling is your focus against yourself, you're focused against infinite intelligence. And that will feel negative. It will not feel good to you. So this is Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. Sydney Banks said, wisdom's only in a positive feeling. Abraham Hicks says, make nothing more important than that you feel good. Every one of them pointing you to live as all that you are. And there is no way that you can live here as God and not feel good.
So in other words, this is me, the personal mind, this is me as infinite mind, and feeling, I can take feeling as an indicator to how close I am to the version of me that allows that infinite perspective to flow through me. Is that the meaning of feeling?
That's beautiful. That, you see, you can feel the degree of it. You can feel the sense of alignment with it. You are not created as an automaton. You are not created as a robot to think as God. You are not here thinking as the infinite in the finite perspective. It's not even rational. It's not even possible to think as God in the finite. Something around all of that wouldn't even make sense. But you can. Are you thinking? See, because everything you're focused upon, the war, the conflicts, the challenges and problems in your life, here's this, going back to your, solving problems and making this practical. Here you are, and your attention is on your business. Your attention is on a conflict. Your attention is on something that is not just right in where you're living or something like that. Well, let's have this understanding. Is that your attention that is on that? Do you even have an attention or a consciousness? What we're talking about is that's God's attention on that thing. You don't have a consciousness of your own. That is the consciousness of God focused finitely with its attention on that war. Now, how is God viewing what is manifested? How is God viewing that? What does God see? Do you think God is fearful of that war? Not
No.
at all. Do you think that God hates one side of that war and loves the other? Not at all. So God's attention and consciousness is on everything you have your attention and consciousness on. And what's different is, from your finite perspective as an aspect of God, you have a different relationship with that. You are an aspect of God and not all that God is. So you are an aspect of God from a finite perspective, and not all that God is from a finite perspective. From your finite perspective, when you see, now you speak of contrast, when you look, so God sees no problem, and God has no hatred, and God has no fear. And so now you look from a finite perspective, and what you see is this contrasting. You see one side versus another. You see things that can harm you and others that can't. So you have stuff to fear. You have all that. But what that contrast does is lights up every aspect of your perception, which is I don't know to say whether it's like an incomplete, it's less than that, right? And that's the reason, by the way, you're able to perceive it. And so it is when you see unwanted things, that is the indicator that there is the you could not perceive what is unwanted if there was not also what is wanted instead. You could not perceive a scarcity of anything, a lack of something, if there were not also the abundance of it, the presence of it. So this is what contrast is. It is Abraham will say, in every particle of the universe, there is that which is wanted and the absence of it. In other words, in order for anything to exist, it's in a dualistic nature. It must have the thing and the absence of the thing. That is the only way the thing can pop out of the energy of all things and exist, is as a thing and not the thing. If it didn't have that distinction, it would be all things.
That's beautiful. And so could we say that maybe the whole reason we are able to experience ourselves as finite selves in the world of forms is to feel that contrast, and then through following our bliss, as Joseph Campbell has pointed to, see how the pure consciousness inspired version of us would act toward that.
Yeah, and let's go before act. Before act. Act is nothing to be
Yeah,
concerned.
relate to and then act.
Right. See, relate to is it. Because relate to is being. Now you're getting into being. Who are you being with that war? Who are you being with this problem? When you are being one way, you are fearful. When you are being one way, it is you are small, and that is powerful, and that is threatening. So when you are being a certain way, it creates an insecurity and all of that. But who you are is God. You are an aspect of God. And this is the part where, as an aspect of God, and you are not all that God is, but through every finite aspect, this is what desire is. Desire is to express more of all that you are. So this is how the infinite is expanding. The infinite is expanding because through every particle of itself, every aspect of itself, like you and I, that as we expand in our beingness, you and I as a particle or an aspect, imagine now 8 billion of these particles, and let's add in trillions for animals and even more for minerals and all other forms of consciousness. And you take every one of these aspects of all that is, and as that aspect expands, the whole is expanding. So this infinite is in an eternal state of expansion only through the expansion of every aspect of itself. It does not expand to become something it is not, because that would suggest that God is less than all that is. God can never be something that it is not, because God is all that is. So how does infinite expand? It must become more of itself. It must expand and become more of itself. Now look at the metaphor with you and I. You are God. You are an aspect of God. You are a finite aspect of all that is. And when that finite aspect becomes more of itself, you expand and become more, and so does the whole. Isn't that just like the most beautiful thing?
Wow, it is. It is. And it's funny how as you're speaking, I have this kind of feeling growing up in me, and yet I'm trying to kind of put it into form or make more of an intellectual sense of it. And it's hard to do that. And I know that people listening to this conversation will have the same thing. Um, so in other words, is if we could say that feeling is this indicator that is built in us, and then desire is kind of like the fuel or the movement of the energy, and it's almost like one, you need one for the other. Like if you don't have the feeling or you misunderstand it, then you won't know whether to go left or right. But if not for your desire to go this way or the other, then the information would just be information, right?
So this is a perfect place to bring up feeling, and I love the way you even just talked about what I had just said, and then the feeling you began feeling in you. And this is really good for the listeners too. I'm just talking. I chatter. And if you go on my website, look at webinars, listen to me on other podcasts, boy, do I talk. I'm like talking and talking and chattering, right? So, but Sydney Banks reminded of this. All that matters is the feeling.
Yeah.
So here I am chattering. I'm talking and I'm saying stuff, and you felt something, right? So here's the deal. That's not because of me. That's not like this thing. Oh, I said this really cool thing. I'm going to write it down because I want to say that again on the next podcast, right? Like I want to say it again at the next. Like, so that's what it is I'm expressing something. Something is being expressed through me. I'm expressing something that I see inside. Now, that will occur as noise, crap, junk. That's not really true. That's a good opinion he's got. Or something else. There's a different feeling that can happen. And when you feel what you feel, even, and people have said this to me, they go, I don't know what you said. I could never repeat it. I have no idea what you actually said, but the feeling, right? So what that means is there was a resonance with what you know to be true within yourself. Mm-hmm. So something happened that resonated with the energy of a truth within you. That's all you need. Because that's all you need. Because it's a truth activated within you. Something more has come through you, and that's the feeling. You can stay with the feeling because that's the part. The details aren't there. That feeling is with you, guiding you, and you are either you are either aligned or misaligned. You are either very harmonious with it or you've distanced yourself with it. All this movement of with it or not so with it is really thought in the way. Mm-hmm. Thought distancing me or aligning me.